Bonjour et bienvenue à notre rendez-vous de midi en direct et en live sur OBS. Nous sommes aujourd'hui le lundi 20 septembre. J'ai juste une courte annonce à vous faire concernant la capacité d'accueil de la salle de presse. Vous aurez peut-être remarqué que le nombre de signes interdisant de s'asseoir sur certains sièges a diminué. Nous passons effectivement de 69 à 99 places disponibles. Je crois que pour le moment, vous êtes 11, donc on a une certaine marge de progression en ce qui concerne votre participation physique au Midday. Ceci se fera évidemment dans le respect des règles sanitaires. Et je tiens bien entendu à repréciser que nous gardons le système virtuel en parallèle à la présence en salle de presse, vous permettant donc de choisir soit de participer de manière physique, soit virtuelle à notre rendez-vous de midi. Voilà, cela clôture nos annonces pour aujourd'hui et nous allons passer à vos questions. Erin.
Bonjour Eric, merci pour la parole. It's a question on EU Army, an issue that it's raised again regarding the recent developments. And I'd like to ask, how possible is the creation of an EU Army regarding the different defense culture of certain member states? And when this could be possible, when could we have an EU Army, if we can have one? Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is a very hypothetical question. The President made very clear during her State of the Union speech her views on the issue of EU defense and called for progress on a European defense union. But as you know, she herself said very clearly that there are proposals on the table, in fact, with regards to battle groups, initial entry force, etc., but that there were deeper questions that needed to be discussed in order to progress on cooperation in the field of defense at the level of the European Union. So I don't think that it's for us to go into scenarios that go beyond what the President has said during her State of the Union speech. But I give the floor as well to Nabila if she wants to add anything on this.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. And as Eric said very clearly, the idea of an EU army has been raised very prominently and in the public debate of the European defense. It states that the European needs to work more closely together for a strong, more integrated and more effective European defense. A European army is not on the agenda for the moment. Our current work is more focused on supporting member states in capacity to development, strengthening our industry, and stepping up work with our partners. This is how we will be able to take more responsibility for our own security and the security of our partners. And this is exactly what we're doing with Strategic Compass. And some, as Eric said, some very concrete elements are on the table right now with the initial entry force, for example.
Thank you very much. Follow-up or on this issue, Karl?
Je crois que le commissaire Šefčovič demain fera une présentation devant les ministres au Conseil Affaires Générales, notamment sur l'état des relations UK-UE. Est-ce qu'il compte ajouter maintenant un chapitre, puisque le Royaume-Uni fait partie de la nouvelle alliance AUKUS? Est-ce que cela change sa présentation de demain au ministre?
Écoute, je ne suis pas en mesure de te donner le détail de l'intervention du vice-président. Si nous avons des éléments à te fournir, nous reviendrons vers toi ultérieurement. Other questions on foreign affairs for Nabila. Please only keep your hand raised in the chat if your question is foreign affairs. Marina.
More for Peter than for Nabila. It's regarding the situation in Kosovo.
Well, since you are the only one your hand raised, I think that we can move to Peter. Merci beaucoup, Nabila. Go ahead, Marina.
Hi. Since yesterday evening and today we have again raising tensions in Kosovo and Metohija, and we have the Kosovo police special forces on the administrative crossings towards Serbia. They are denying entry for all the cars with Serbia car plates to Kosovo. This is again a breaching of the Brussels agreement. Do you, Peter, as a spokesperson of EU, which is like facilitator in this dialogue, has anything to say regarding this? What is the position of EU?
Thank you, Marina. Indeed, we are watching the situation, the unfolding situation very closely. And on this occasion, I would like to stress that freedom of movement is one of the cornerstones of the European Union. And as such, we expect both Kosovo and Serbia to promote freedom of movement in the region. We call on both parties to exercise restraint, to refrain from unilateral actions and reduce tensions immediately, without any delay. Immediately, the tensions need to be reduced. We also urge both parties to use the EU-facilitated dialogue to deal with issues and to use it as a platform to address and resolve all the open issues they might have between themselves, including related to freedom of movement and license plates, as is the case in this current situation. Now, right now, EU Special Representative for the dialogue, Miroslav Lajčák, is on the ground. He is in Belgrade. He will meet Serbian President Vučić in the afternoon to address the situation. And in the past hours, he was also in touch with the political leadership in Kosovo to address the situation. And what we expect as the European Union from both sides, from Kosovo and Serbia, is to foster an environment which is conducive to reconciliation between them, which is conducive to regional stability and cooperation for the benefit of the people on both sides and in the region. This is crucial for reaching the comprehensive, legally binding agreement which we are trying to facilitate, because this will finally make it possible to normalize the relations between Serbia and Kosovo.
Thank you. Marina, you have a follow-up.
Just a short follow-up, and it's a little bit formality question. Peter, why do you still use this sentence like both sides? You're asking for both sides to constrain, when this is obviously which side is breaking the agreement?
Well, throughout the history of the dialogue or relations between Kosovo and Pristina, we've seen very many times the mutual accusations and statements from both sides accusing one or the other. That's why we are saying it is important, if you have an issue, if you have an open issue, address it, use the platform which is created for it, which is the EU-facilitated dialogue. This goes for both sides. If there are tensions, it's always action and reaction to something. So both sides are the subject of our calls to be aware that it is really important for the benefit of both sides, for the benefit of people in Kosovo and Serbia, to try to create an atmosphere which is conducive to dialogue and reconciliation, because that's the only way forward. Otherwise, you will have always confrontation, and this is not what we are interested in seeing in our immediate neighborhood.
Thank you. Augustine, I think you have a question on the same issue.
Yes, thank you. Peter, my question is about a practical issue here, apart from your wise call to reduce the tensions. Kosovo is saying that they are implementing practically the agreement because the arrangement for previous arrangements expired in mid of September. So they are not denying entry, they are just changing the car plates and giving them a provisional ones. And Kosovo is doing exactly what Serbia is doing for years now for the cars that enter Serbia from territory of Kosovo. So since this issue was one of the main topics in the dialogue for years, after 11 years the car plates are still one of the most important topics. You should have an opinion on this, what should be done practically apart from just calling to reduce the tensions. Thank you.
Thank you. And we are very clear about what needs to be done practically. What needs to be done is to continue the EU-facilitated dialogue to which both parties have committed. The dialogue is there as a platform to solve all the open issues. So even if you have agreements from the past which you are supposed to implement and stick to, if you have questions, if you have doubts, then the right way to address this is through the EU-facilitated dialogue. So this is what we are focusing on, this is what we try to bring about, that both parties engage in the dialogue to solve all the issues so that we avoid situations like we have now in the north of Kosovo.
Thank you very much. I see one further hand raised. Brian, is this on Kosovo? Brian Carter.
Brian Carter. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Your question is on. Question is on foreign affairs on Kosovo.
Foreign affairs on Kosovo.
We're having difficulties with Brian. Any other questions? On any other questions on foreign affairs for Peter? So I have a question from Louise on relations with Australia and the US, I see. Louise.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, Louise, go ahead.
Yes, Louise,
Great.
go ahead.
Sorry, my connection is not very good today. It's given the comments that were made last night by the French Europe Minister Clément Beaune about how he sees a trade deal with Australia as unthinkable given what happened last week. I'm wondering from your point of view, what's your take? Are you going to have the next round with Australia as planned this fall? And also, do you think that the fallout from this new AUKUS deal could have any implications for relations with the US? EU-US relations, that is. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Louise, for your question. Look, at the end of the last round with Australia, which took place in June, it was agreed that the next round of trade talks would take place in October. So this is the current state of play. We are analyzing the impact of the AUKUS announcement and what this impact could be on this schedule. As to our relations with the US, I pass the floor to Peter.
Thank you. I can only say very briefly that this is something that is already currently being discussed. Tonight there will be a meeting of EU 27 foreign ministers chaired by HRVP Borrell in New York on the margins of the UN General Assembly. So you can expect that this issue will be raised and discussed by the ministers, and it's not really up to us now to preempt the course and the results, possible results of that discussion.
Thank you. On this issue? Yes, go ahead.
Hello, Jessica Parker at the BBC. Just there, Eric, you're saying that you're analysing the impact of the AUKUS announcement. Does that mean you're saying what's happened could have a material impact on those trade talks with Australia?
Look, I made a very clear statement. We are analyzing the impact that the announcement could have on the schedule for the next round. I don't think it can be clearer than that. Any other questions for us on this? Please only keep your hand raised if your questions are related to the consequences or the fallout of the announcement on AUKUS. Philippe.
Est-ce qu'il y aura plus tard dans la semaine ce qui est habituellement appelé le dîner transatlantique entre chefs de diplomatie des deux rives de l'Atlantique? Merci. Et sinon, pourquoi?
Peter.
Je ne suis pas sûr spécifiquement sur cet événement, donc on va vérifier et retourner à vous avec la confirmation.
Naomi.
Hi, Eric. Thank you for taking my question. My question is about the potential impact of this on relations with the UK. Obviously, this is something that's quite important in terms of resetting the relationship post-Brexit. And I wonder if you could comment on whether these events have any impact or whether that's something you're analysing or anything to say at all. Thank you.
No, I don't believe we have any comment to make on this question. As you know, we have with the UK a very clear trade and cooperation agreement, and there's also the protocol, which carry issues of their own that Vice President Šefčovič in particular is focusing on. We have no further comment to make on this. Alexander.
Hi, just a quick follow-up on the trade aspect of the EU-Australia trade negotiation. I was just wondering, at this stage of the negotiation, what roles do the member states actually play? So, you know, just if we take these strong statements from France, I mean, what impact could it have on the Commission, which obviously has a mandate to negotiate and, you know, to carry out the negotiation to the conclusion? I was just wondering, what is the involvement now? Thank you very much.
Hi. Listen, we have no further comment to make on this, and certainly not speculative answers to speculative questions. As I've said, the schedule for the next round of trade talks was set at the end of the last round which took place. We are currently analyzing the situation, and we will have to see what decisions are taken on this. But we have no further comment to make. Further comments, further questions on this, taking into account that I've just said what our line on the issue is. Alexander, you have a follow-up. Oh, no, sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Alexander.
No, it's just. I mean, it's sort of a technical question. I mean, I'm just wondering. You know, it is a technical question. It's like, what is a member state's role? I think a lot of people listening now, and you know, just to be clear in my head, what is the role of a member state once you know a member, you know, once the negotiations are launched? I was just curious to know what that was, so that we can better weigh the comments of Clément Beaune. You know, because if he says something, then we may think one thing, but I think if you clarify the procedure, it might be another. That's all. Thanks.
Thanks. I'll call Miriam to give you a bit of detail on how trade negotiations function, reminding you, obviously, that it's the Commission that carries out the trade negotiations for the EU. Miriam.
Yes, thank you. So the Commission negotiates on the basis of a mandate from the Member States. This mandate is set at the beginning of the negotiation, and then, of course, at the end of the negotiation, the Commission proposes the text of the final agreement for endorsement by the Council and by the European Parliament through consent. In any case, throughout the process of negotiations, the Commission is, of course, constantly in contact with the Member States and also with the European Parliament, informing them regularly of the state of play of the negotiations. So Member States are really involved during the whole process of the negotiation too.
Thank you. David.
Oui, merci Eric. J'aurais 3 questions en fait, si je le peux. La première, c'est à toi. Je voulais savoir si la présidente a un commentaire par rapport à ce que s'est produit, à cette partnership AUKUS. Peut-être je n'ai pas vu, mais je voulais savoir si au-delà de l'aspect spécifique des négociations commerciales avec l'Australie, il y a un commentaire de la part de la présidente. Deuxième question, c'est pour Peter. Je voulais savoir si la réunion des ministres des Affaires étrangères, qui est, si j'ai bien compris, pour ce soir, était déjà prévue, ou il y a une demande de la part de la France ou d'autres de discuter la question et donc de convoquer cette réunion. Et pour Myriam, si je comprends bien, il y a toujours les consultations, informations entre la Commission et les États membres, mais un État membre ne peut pas décider pour les autres d'interrompre les négociations. J'ai bien compris. Et autre précision, on parle bien d'un accord commercial, pas un accord plus important, donc en termes de ratification et tout ça. Est-ce que l'accord est limité libre-échange? Merci.
Merci. Sur ta première question, ce que je peux te dire, c'est qu'évidemment, la présidente suit de très très près, et depuis l'annonce qui a été faite, la situation et les conséquences de cet accord, et elle consulte de manière large ses interlocuteurs sur les effets de cette annonce. Elle n'a pas fait de commentaires pour le moment, mais bien entendu, elle est parfaitement au courant de cette annonce et en contact avec ses interlocuteurs, tant à l'intérieur qu'à l'extérieur de la Commission. Je pense que je peux confirmer au nom de Peter que la réunion des ministres des Affaires étrangères prévue à New York ce soir est bien prévue. Elle commence comme toujours, oui, absolument, voilà, merci. C'est comme au théâtre, j'ai un souffleur. Elle est prévue comme habituellement lors de ces événements. En ce qui concerne ta troisième question, je passe la parole à Myriam, mais en précisant bien encore une fois que c'est la Commission qui mène les négociations, bien entendu en contact étroit avec les États membres. C'est la Commission qui, avec le partenaire commercial avec lequel nous sommes en négociation, fixe le calendrier des réunions. Donc c'est pour l'instant la Commission qui pilote ces négociations en étroite collaboration et information avec les États membres. Myriam, si tu veux rajouter quelque chose.
Oui, merci. Je ne pense pas que j'ai grand-chose à rajouter. Comme c'est expliqué, on négocie sur la base d'un mandat qui est donné par les États membres, car il s'agit d'un accord qui tombe sur la compétence de la politique commerciale commune de l'Union européenne.
Merci. Christian.
Oui, en fait, vous avez un peu répondu à la question que je voulais poser sur le fait caractère exceptionnel ou habituel de la réunion des chefs de la diplomatie en marge de la réunion à New York. Moi, je voudrais aller un petit peu sur quel est votre sentiment quand on a annoncé cet accord, quand cet accord a été annoncé. Il se trouve que M. Borrell a été le premier à intervenir. Et il a dit qu'effectivement, l'Union européenne n'avait été ni consultée ni informée. Mais il a ajouté une petite phrase en disant « Nous comprenons la déception de la France ». C'est gentil, c'est assez neutre. Et en fait, durant le week-end, on est monté dans une gradation. C'est-à-dire que la France est vraiment très en colère. Quand on voit le langage utilisé par le chef de la diplomatie française, on sent qu'un grand État membre est très contrarié. Et très contrarié à la fois par ce qui s'est passé et par le fait que dans l'Union européenne, il n'y a aucun soutien exprimé. Donc je voudrais savoir, selon Mme von der Leyen, est-ce qu'on est dans une situation assez grave, quasiment de crise dans des relations internationales? Je ne vais pas rentrer dans le discours sur l'accord commercial qui est en négociation, puisqu'en fait, il était cité par M. Barnier comme le degré zéro des accords commerciaux, il est nulle part. C'est-à-dire quand les Britanniques disaient qu'ils voulaient l'accord Australie, on avait tous compris que ce n'était pas d'accord. Donc on part avec un accord qui est compliqué, qui soit gelé, qui soit...
Christian,
voilà, on n'est pas très loin.
Je peux te demander de poser ta question
Ma question, c'est est-ce que Mme von der Leyen est préoccupée, et très sérieusement préoccupée, par le fait qu'un grand État membre soit très, très, très fâché? Voilà.
Bien entendu, la présidente de la Commission européenne, lorsqu'un État membre exprime de manière forte des préoccupations, est à l'écoute. La présidente a eu l'occasion de s'entretenir avec le président Macron en marge de la réunion qui a eu lieu vendredi à Athènes, dans le cadre du sommet Med 9. Et comme je viens de le dire, elle est évidemment en contact étroit avec la France, avec les partenaires européens de la France, avec les membres de son collège, pour analyser les conséquences de l'annonce qui a été faite mercredi soir de la semaine dernière. Mais maintenant, je crois que tu nous connais, Christian, tu connais ce collège. Nous n'avons pas l'habitude de réagir à chaud. Nous avons l'habitude d'analyser à tête reposée et de manière très détaillée ce genre d'annonce et l'impact que cela peut avoir avant de réagir et d'expliquer ou de présenter quelles seront nos réponses. Il faut bien se souvenir que cet accord entre le Royaume-Uni, l'Australie et les États-Unis porte notamment sur une question de coopération militaire qui n'impliquait pas directement l'Union européenne, mais bien un État membre. Et donc, forcément, nous n'avons pas nécessairement, dès le début, l'ensemble des informations nécessaires. C'est bien pour cela que la présidente consulte intensément. Mark, is it still on this issue?
For Peter or for you, why does High Representative Joseph Borrell need to meet with the 27 foreign ministers to discuss this failed French defense contract?
No, I think that this is a meeting which always takes place when the ministers of foreign affairs are present in New York for the annual General Assembly of the United Nations. So it's not a specific meeting which has been called because of this announcement, but a normal meeting of ministers of foreign affairs that takes place in New York every year on this occasion. I hope this answers your question. Mark.
Peter said they would discuss this, so that's why I want to know, why would High Representative Borrell need to discuss this French defense contract with the 26 other foreign ministers? Thank you.
Well, I will let Peter answer this question, but to me it seems pretty obvious that when ministers of foreign affairs meet, they tend to discuss topical issues. Peter, you want to add anything to this la palissade, as we say in French?
Indeed. As Eric said, this is the first opportunity for the EU foreign ministers to discuss the implications and consequences of the whole deal, not only the issue between France and Australia, but the implications of this whole AUKUS alliance, which was announced without the EU being informed or consulted. So this is what usually happens, that when the ministers of the EU, foreign ministers of the EU meet, they discuss all the current issues on the agenda, all the latest developments, which have a serious impact on the EU or its member states.
Thank you. Brian, is your question on this? On phishing. So we'll come back to that later. Naomi, you have another question on this?
Yeah, just a coordination question. Could you give us a time estimate for this meeting and whether there'll be any update afterwards, like any press communications? Thank you.
Of course, if you are referring to the meeting of the foreign ministers, it's scheduled to start around midnight, Brussels time. It's scheduled to last about 2 hours, and there should be some media output by the HRVP in form either of a statement or doorstep afterwards.
Thank you. Any other questions on foreign affairs? Yes, I see, thank you, Peter, that Angelina, who has problems with her connection, had a question or was asking for a comment on the elections in Russia. Peter.
Yes, the European Union believes in the importance of free and fair elections if they are taking place wherever in the world. I mean, people all around the world are entitled to express their views about how their countries should be run in free and fair elections. Now, what we have seen in case of Russia over the last few days in terms of Duma elections and also regional elections is that these elections have taken place in an atmosphere of intimidating critical and independent voices, and these elections took place without credible international observation. We regret very much that Russia's decision to severely reduce and limit and restrict the size and format of the possible international OEC ODIHR electoral mission prevented the deployment of this mission. And we take note of independent and reliable sources reporting serious violation during the vote. As I mentioned, in the run-up to these elections, there was an increased crackdown on opposition politicians, civil society organizations, civil society activists, human rights activists, independent media outlets, against journalists, all this with the aim of silencing any critical opposition and removing real competition. And this resulted in the limitation of the choice which the Russian people had, and it limited also their ability to get full and accurate information about candidates and make an informed choice during these elections. And we are really convinced that the Russian Federation, and we call on the Russian Federation to abide by its commitments taken within the UN, within the OEC framework, within the Council of Europe framework, in terms of protection of human rights and democratic values, which includes also organizing free and fair elections. And maybe one more point, because we will never recognize the elections in illegally annexed Crimea, because Crimea is Ukraine. And we are also concerned by the fact that citizens of Ukraine and population from Ukrainian territories in the east, which are currently not under the control of the legitimate Ukrainian government, have been given passports in order to participate in these Russian elections. This runs counter to the spirit of the Minsk agreements. It runs counter to the objectives of Minsk agreements, and we are calling on Russia, and we expect from Russia to refrain from actions that go against the commitments stemming from the Minsk agreements.
Thank you, Peter. Are there other questions for Peter on Russia? Momchil.
Hello, good afternoon. Well, last week the European Parliament adopted a resolution calling Europe to be ready not to recognize the elections in Russia, not only in Crimea, I mean in Russia. So is there any readiness not to recognize these elections?
Well, recognition of the overall result of elections is national competence by the member states, so it's up to the individual member states how they feel about it and to decide how they proceed, whether they recognize and under what circumstances. By the way, this might be also Russian elections, and the results and the overall situation might be also something discussed by the foreign ministers tonight. And also there is a meeting scheduled between High Representative and the Russian foreign minister, so it will be, of course, mentioned. But it's very difficult without international, independent, credible observation like the one which is usually provided by the OEC and ODIHR. There was no international independent observation, so it's very difficult to actually see how the elections were executed. But we have a number of reports from independent local observers that were reporting a lot of irregularities during these elections.
Monchi, you have a follow-up?
Yes, I have. It's regarding the meeting between Mr. Lavrov and the HRVP. So taking into account what happened in Moscow during the last meeting, what can we expect? What will the HRVP and the diplomatic service and the commission do? What happened in Moscow not to repeat?
Thanks, Momchil. The EU is a very predictable and transparent partner, and in terms of what you can expect from the meeting, I mean, from our side, you can always expect only constructive engagement to open the issues which are of mutual interest or which are of a concern to the European Union. Russia is a permanent member of Security Council of the UN. So there are issues, global issues, which you will not be able to solve without participation and engagement with Russia. And the EU's position and relations with Russia include the so-called 5 guiding principles based on which our engagement is then implemented. And one of these points is engagement where it is in our interest. So you can expect that the HRVP will meet with Foreign Minister Lavrov in the spirit of our general policy of engagement, engaging with partners constructively, professionally, and along the 5 guiding principles the EU has.
Thank you very much. Catherine, you also have a question on this election.
Yes, Eric, I don't know if there was a question last week about this, but it was reported that both Google and Apple had removed an app, a smart voting app that's been developed by opposition figures in Russia. And I'm just wondering, is this the sort of thing that you could comment on? Does the European Commission take a view on this decision by major tech companies to remove this particular way to maybe have a more balanced approach and to what's happening, given that the media is pretty much run by the state there? Thanks.
Well, without going into details of the motivation and justification for private companies which are not European to take a decision in Russia, I would only recall what I said already previously. These elections, what we have seen in the run-up to these elections, was an atmosphere of intimidation of all the critical independent voices, shrinking the space for civil society, prosecuting or discouraging or intimidating civil rights activists, journalists, etc., etc. Already a long time ago, Russia launched activities that are not really conducive for a pluralistic society with a vibrant civil society. And these are the 2 laws, one law on the so-called foreign agents and another law on the undesirable organizations. So even the legislation which is adopted in Russia is creating conditions for such intimidation and limitation of the free space. And we said many times that, for example, these 2 pieces of legislation go contrary to the obligations by Russia within the framework of the UN and OEC and Council of Europe. So you have to see also the context of the decision taken regarding the application developed by Mr. Navalny as a result of the overall created atmosphere of intimidation in Russia in the run-up to those elections last weekend.
Thank you very much. Are there other questions on foreign affairs for Peter today? Not the case, so we move on to other issues. Brian, you had a question on fishing.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can, go ahead.
We can, go ahead.
Good, sorry for the problems earlier. Yeah, I would just like to have a reaction from the Commission about this new report that was just released by Our Fish campaign, showing that the fuel tax subsidies amount to a tax break for the EU fishing vessels of between 750 million to 1.5 billion euros per year, which of course reduces the cost of fishing, but also emits more CO2 emissions and leads to overfishing. I would like to have a reaction from you on this report.
Thank you. A non-Brexit fishing question, but it's still you. My God. Go ahead.
Thanks very much. Hi, Brian. Thanks very much for your question. We take note of the report. I'm not going to go into details now on the substance of the report from the podium. All I would say is that the fuel that is used in maritime transport, including in the fishing industry, is indeed currently fully exempt from energy taxation in the EU. We agree that this is an anomaly, given the role that the fuel plays in the sector in energy consumption and pollution. And you might remember back in July when we had the Fit for 55 package, we came forward with an idea to amend the current energy taxation directive. And under that proposal, fuel used in maritime transport, including in the fishing industry, will become taxable. So that's all I'd have to say on that for now.
Brian, you had raised your hand again for a follow-up, just as you were starting to answer, actually. Go ahead.
On the revision of the Energy Taxation Directive, this report says that your planned taxation is 10 to 20 times lower than the normal taxation of fuel for road transport, for example. So I would like to know why that is the case, and if you plan to increase that tax to make it equal to what users of the road or the road transport industry has to pay in terms of tax on its fuel.
Yep. Thanks, Brian, for that. So indeed, yeah, as I said, we came forward with this proposal in July as part of the Fit for 55 package. That's now being discussed, of course, by member states and by the European Parliament. As you said as well, yes, this area will become taxable, and it is also true that it will be subject to a lower minimum rate applied to motor fuels used in agriculture. The reasoning behind this is that it will avoid the risks of carbon leakage and fuel bunkering, whereby vessels used for intra-EU navigation are actually filled with fuel outside the EU, where taxes may be lower or non-existent. Just a final general point that I would like to make is that the Energy Taxation Directive sets minimum energy taxation rates within the European Union, and member states are, of course, free to set higher rates if they so wish.
Thank you very much. Brian, one last follow-up on this.
Yeah, sorry to insist. I didn't understand your answer as to why that tax would be lower than the land tax. Could you please repeat, but in a clearer way, because I really didn't understand it. Sorry.
Dan, more slowly.
No, that's no problem. Thanks, Brian. No, what I'll do is I will give the general reasoning behind the review, and then if there are specific detailed issues on the Energy Taxation Directive, I'll get back to you bilaterally. But let me just recall once again that the idea behind the review of the Energy Taxation Directive was to bring this part of industry under taxable rules, given that this is a big issue for fighting climate change and for fighting pollution. So under the ETD proposal, this area will become taxable, as I said. It is, of course, subject to lower minimum rate applied to motor fuel used in agriculture. And again, the reasoning behind that was that it will avoid the risks of carbon leakage and fuel bunkering. Now, of course, I can come back to you bilaterally on the idea of fuel bunkering because it's quite technical and I don't have all of the details in front of me right now. So that is the reasoning behind that, but do allow me to come back to you on the technical details.
Thank you. Other questions for Dan whilst he is on the podium? That is not the case. Thank you. So we go to Thomas with a question on energy prices.
Yes, hello everybody. I would like to know, the Green Deal is heavily linked to the success of boosting renewable energies. In this regard, I would like to know when the Commission will come up with a clear evaluation if nuclear power plants may be considered to contribute as green hydrogen producer. Et oui, je voudrais bien aussi savoir si la Commission n'a pas peur qu'un grand pays membre avec 58 centrales nucléaires sera fâché si leur centrale nucléaire ne sera pas considérée comme fournisseur pour hydrogène verte. Merci.
Tim.
Hi. I'm going to try and answer that. I think we're kind of touching on a few different things there, Thomas, in terms of nuclear, and you were talking about authorization of nuclear to produce green hydrogen. I mean, from a technical point of view, nuclear power plants can be used for the production of hydrogen. I mean, that's a technicality. I don't know if you're kind of veering into the taxonomy territory there in terms of nuclear, perhaps. But yeah, I'm not quite sure where you're going with the question. I'm afraid if you could clarify a little bit.
Thomas, have another go.
Yes, if I may. You tipped the point. The crucial point is if the taxonomy will come up with a clear definition if nuclear power plants will be considered as a possibility for green hydrogen. This is a question which is still open, and the energy community is waiting for an answer from Brussels.
I think, as you say yourself, that question is open. The taxonomy issue is one for Dan rather than myself, and he can perhaps step up in a moment and give you the latest state of play where we are with those measures.
Yeah, indeed. So it's a more taxonomy question, in fact. Dan, I don't know if you want to add anything. I mean, the taxonomy proposal still has to come on that, and therefore it's at that point in time that we will know. It would be my answer to your question, Thomas. But I invite you to get in touch with Dan bilaterally if you want more detail on this. Any other questions for us today? Carl.
Oui, c'est une question de logistique. On attend mercredi un arrêt important de la Cour constitutionnelle polonaise. Je les ai contactés pour savoir à quelle heure on aurait l'oreille. Je n'ai pas de réponse. Est-ce que la Commission sait à quelle heure cet arrêt tombera? Et est-ce qu'on peut s'attendre mercredi à un briefing technique pour une lecture juridique de cet arrêt?
Alors, tu comprends bien que si la Cour elle-même n'est pas capable de te donner l'heure, nous n'allons certainement pas nous aventurer sur ce terrain-là. D'autant plus que, si mes souvenirs sont bons, c'est une décision qui a été reportée un certain nombre de fois. Donc, comme disait Jonathan Todd lorsqu'il était ici, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. En ce qui concerne un briefing technique, je crois, Carl, qu'il faut lui laisser le temps d'analyser l'arrêt. Il m'est impossible de te dire maintenant si il fera sens le moment venu, quel qu'il soit, de proposer immédiatement un briefing, ou s'il faudra un peu de temps, ou si les choses seront de toute manière tellement limpides qu'il n'y a pas besoin de briefing technique. Donc malheureusement, je crois que nous sommes dans le même bateau de ce point de vue-là. Il faudra que nous adaptions. Voilà, y a-t-il d'autres questions pour nous aujourd'hui? Je n'en vois pas, donc merci et nous nous retrouverons demain. Bon après-midi.